came out of Egypt, and which was called the Passover. And so we do celebrate this Passover in companies, leaving nothing of what we sacrifice till the day following. The feast of unleavened bread succeeds that of the Passover, and falls on the 15th day of the month, and continues 7 days, wherein they feed on unleavened bread, on every one of which days 2 bulls are killed, and 1 ram, and 7 lambs. Now these lambs are entirely burnt, besides the kid of the goats, which is added to all the rest, for sins: for it is intended as a feast for the priests on every one of those days. But on the 2nd day of unleavened bread, which is the 16th day of the month, they first partake of the fruits of the earth, for before that day they do not touch them. And while they suppose it proper to honor God, from whom they obtain this plentiful provision, in the first place, they offer the first fruits of their barley, and that in the manner following: They take a handful of the ears and dry them, then beat them small, and purge the barley from the bran. They then bring 1/10 deal to the altar to God, and, casting 1 handful of it upon the fire, they leave the rest for the use of the priest. And after this it is that they may publicly or privately reap their harvest. They also at this participation of the first fruits of the earth sacrifice a lamb as a burnt offering to God. When a week of weeks has passed over after this sacrifice, which weeks contain 49 days, on the 50th day, which is Pentecost, but is called by the Hebrews Asartha, which signifies Pentecost, they bring to God a loaf, made of wheat flour, of 2/10 deals, with leaven. And for sacrifices they bring 2 lambs, and when they have only presented them to God, they are made ready for supper for the priests, nor is it permitted to leave anything of them till the day following. They also slay 3 bullocks for a burnt offering, and 2 rams, and 14 lambs, with 2 kids of the goats, for sins. Nor is there any one of the festivals but in it they offer burnt offerings. They also allow themselves to rest on every one of them. Accordingly, the law prescribes in them all what kinds they are to sacrifice and how they are to rest entirely, and must slay sacrifices in order to feast upon them. However, out of the common charges, baked bread was set on the table of show bread, without leaven, of 24/10 deals of flour, for so much is spent upon this bread. 2 heaps of these were baked. They were baked the day before the Sabbath, but were brought into the holy place on the morning of the Sabbath, and set upon the holy table, 6 on a heap, 1 loaf still standing over against another, where 2 golden cups full of frankincense were also set upon them. And there they remained till another Sabbath, and then other loaves were brought in their stead, while the loaves were given to the priests for their food, and the frankincense was burnt in that sacred fire, wherein all their offerings were burnt also. And so other frankincense was set upon the loaves instead of what was there before. The high priest also, of his own charges, offered a sacrifice, and that twice every day. It was made of flour mingled with oil, and gently baked by the fire. The quantity was 1/10 deal of flour. He brought the half of it to the fire in the morning, and the other half at night. The account of these sacrifices I shall give more accurately hereafter, but I think I have premised what for the present may be sufficient concerning them. CHAPTER 11. Of the purifications. Moses took out the tribe of Levi from communicating with the rest of the people, and set them apart to be a holy tribe, and purified them by water taken from perpetual springs, and with such sacrifices as were usually offered to God on the like occasions. He delivered to them also the tabernacle, and the sacred vessels, and the other curtains, which were made for covering the tabernacle, that they might minister under the conduct of the priests, who had been already consecrated to God. He also determined concerning animals, which of them might be used for food, and which they were obliged to abstain from, which matters, when this work shall give me occasion, shall be further explained. And the causes shall be added by which he was moved to allot some of them to be our food, and enjoined us to abstain from others. However, he entirely forbade us the use of blood for food. and esteemed it to contain the soul and spirit. He also forbade us to eat the flesh of an animal that died of itself, as also the caul, and the fat of goats and sheep and bulls. He also ordered that those whose bodies were afflicted with leprosy, and that had a gonorrhea, should not come into the city. Nay, he removed the women, when they had their natural purgations, till the seventh day, after which he looked on them as pure, and permitted them to come in again. The law permits those also who have taken care of funerals to come in after the same manner, when this number of days is over. But if any continued longer than that number of days in a state of pollution, the law appointed the offering 2 lambs for a sacrifice, the one of which they are to purge by fire, and for the other the priests take it for themselves. In the same manner do those sacrifice who have had the gonorrhea. But he that sheds his seed in his sleep, if he go down into cold water, has the same privilege with those that have lawfully accompanied with their wives. And for the lepers, he suffered them not to come into the city at all, nor to live with any others, as if they were in effect dead persons. But if any one had obtained by prayer to God the recovery from that distemper, and had gained a healthful complexion again, such a one returned thanks to God, with several sorts of sacrifices, concerning which we will speak hereafter. Whence one cannot but smile at those who say that Moses was himself afflicted with the leprosy when he fled out of Egypt, and that he became the conductor of those who on that account left that country, and led them into the land of Canaan. For had this been true, Moses would not have made these laws to his own dishonor, which indeed it was more likely he would have opposed, if others had endeavored to introduce them. And this the rather, because there are lepers in many nations, who yet are in honor, and not only free from reproach and avoidance, but who have been great captains of armies, and been entrusted with high offices in the commonwealth, and have had the privilege of entering into holy places and temples, so that nothing hindered. But if either Moses himself, or the multitude that was with him, had been liable to such a misfortune in the color of his skin, he might have made laws about them for their credit and advantage, and have laid no manner of difficulty upon them. Accordingly, it is a plain case, that it is out of violent prejudice only that they report these things about us. But Moses was pure from any such distemper, and lived with countrymen who were pure of it also, and thence made the laws which concerned others that had the distemper. He did this for the honor of God. But as to these matters, let every one consider them after what manner he pleases. As to the women, when they have borne a child, Moses forbade them to come into the temple, or touch the sacrifices, before 40 days were over, supposing it to be a boy. But if she hath borne a girl, the law is that she cannot be admitted before twice that number of days be over. And when after the before mentioned time appointed for them they perform their sacrifices, the priests distribute them before God. But if any one suspect that his wife has been guilty of adultery, he was to bring a 10th deal of barley flour. They then cast 1 handful to God, and gave the rest of it to the priests for food. One of the priests set the woman at the gates that are turned towards the temple, and took the veil from her head, and wrote the name of God on parchment, and enjoined her to swear that she had not at all injured her husband, and to wish that, if she had violated her chastity, her right thigh might be put out of joint, that her belly might swell, and that she might die thus, but that if her husband, by the violence of his affection and of the jealousy which arose from it, had been rashly moved to this suspicion, that she might bear a male child in the 10th month. Now when these oaths were over, the priest wiped the name of God out of the parchment, and wrung the water into a vial. He also took some dust out of the temple, if any happened to be there, and put a little of it into the vial, and gave it her to drink. Whereupon the woman, if she were unjustly accused, conceived with child, and brought it to perfection in her womb. But if she had broken her faith of wedlock to her husband, and had sworn falsely before God, she died in a reproachful manner, her thigh fell off from her, and her belly swelled with a dropsy. And these are the ceremonies about sacrifices, and about the purifications thereto belonging, which Moses provided for his country.